Hey everyone, a question about stress. So it begins with a quote. Stress is a feeling, and like all feelings, it comes only and always from our innocent misuse of the gift of thought. And the listener goes on to say, I just read this from a 3P teacher. A couple of years ago, I'd have said 100% yes. But interestingly, it really jarred when I read it. Oversimplification and spiritual bypass came to mind. Can you speak about this, please? Yeah, so in the quote, the word thought has a capital T because it's one of the three principles, as in the gift of the human capacity to generate subjective experience. And the the quote, stress is a feeling, and like all feelings, it comes only and always from our innocent misuse of the gift of thought. Is that bypass is really the question. And oh, it's so interesting, this, because we have such extremes in these conversations about reality, don't we? Because on the one hand, we have non-dual teachers who are saying there's nothing. The whole thing is a construction of mind, of thought, of experience, and there is nothing. There's no external truth other than the infinite absolute is the only truth, and everything else is a creation that has no meaning, no reality to it, no objectivity to it. So there's that on the one hand, and we can see how this quote is leaning in that direction, isn't it? It's saying that the experience of stress is a subjective experience that is coming from the power of the human mind to create a sense of being, and that's it. There's nothing beyond that. And then we have how reality actually appears, where it looks like we go to the gym and we experience stress within a muscle from the pressure of the weights, and that stress makes the muscle stronger. It looks like there is an apparent reality to that. And so I think in this conversation, always, that's the tightrope we're walking, is really how can the whole system come into a greater alignment with truth without bypassing, without using this conversation as a way to negate or numb or distract from or deny the things in reality that are looking true. And I think always a test for this is, this quote, would we say it to a prison inmate, or a prisoner of a concentration camp, or a child who's being abused, or someone in famine in Africa who can't eat? Would we go up to someone and say, this stress that you're experiencing is a feeling, and like all feelings, it comes only from your innocent misuse of the gift of thought? We wouldn't, would we? And I think it's interesting to look at why we wouldn't say that to a physical body undergoing immense pressure, whereas on the other hand, where it does have openings of freedom and realism and sanity, for say someone like me in the midst of my public speaking phobia, experiencing total annihilating stress at someone coming in saying, oh, would you mind saying a few words in the staff meeting today, Claire? What's the difference? What's going on? Well, I think this is how it helps us to not bypass, is that there are apparent human bodies. There is an apparent reality. And these apparent human bodies operate best within certain quite narrowly defined parameters, don't we? There is a requirement for a narrow range of internal body temperature, and it's just a slightly wider external temperature. There's requirement for hydration and nourishment. There's requirement for a certain level of humidity and lack of exposure, environmental exposure. There's requirement for social interaction, and these tolerances are aspects of the physical, and when there is pressure put on the physical by going outside of the normal range, then the internal can feel stress. That's the sort of definition in physics, is that the external force is the pressure, and the experience within the object is the stress. So pressure put on my arm and the experience within the arm of stress, you know, the sort of the fracture beginning within the bone is showing the tolerances of my arm. And there are individuals, obviously, who go to the very limits of human endurance. Wim Hof is a nice example for it. The very limits of exposure and temperature on the physical, to such an extent that things that would cause immense stress, like death even for the majority of us, for him have become pleasurable. The SAS teams, you know, Olympic athletes, people, like the intense training of the system to withstand greater and greater and greater pressure, is an awesome capacity of being human, isn't it? And so what does that have to do with thought, with a capital T? Is an interesting question, isn't it? Because the experience of it is subjective. It's through the power of experiential mental capacity, and yet there is there's an apparent reality to pressure, to stress, that isn't dictated by the subjective. So, you know, I mean, that's self-evident, isn't it, that if someone is denied water, the stress on the system becomes so intense that they will die. So the subjective experience of dying, yes, is generated from within, from what is being triggered or believed or created in that moment. And at the same time, there is almost, as much as we can get to, a objective pressure on an apparently real physical system that is detrimental to the extent that physical system expires. And this is the difficult line that we're walking, because, and this is where there's a very valid criticism that 3Ps, or talks about thought, or non-duality, spirituality, creeps into bypass. And so how do we do the two? How do we recognize the apparent reality? How do we respect the mind-body systems? And at the same time, how do we acknowledge and recognize the power of the creative mind, the power of the subjective mind? Well, I think it seems to me that we start with reality, and with what's not real, and what can fall away through this conversation. So when I mentioned the public speaking, the capacity to speak in public was monumentally reduced, was down to zero, and the pressure of a casual invitation to speak at a meeting was immense, because that whole experience was revolving around an idea of a separate, vulnerable, insecure, shameful, lacking, worthless me that would be exposed and annihilated through speaking in public. And that belief structure, that sense of what I am, that believed subjective experience of what I am in that moment, was made up of a conditioned program of beliefs and meaning and experiences, trauma, wounds that had led to the creation of an identity of lack, an identity of me as separate from the whole, and that identity was deeply insecure. And so the whole subjective experience revolved around that. Everything was personal. All effort, all attention was directed at, what are people thinking about me? What is this going to mean about me? What will this mean for my career? What does this failure and this humiliation mean for my future? Me at the center of it, dictating all subjective experience and dictating how the pressure appeared. So the pressure and the stress were made of the same thing. They couldn't be separated. For another colleague, an invitation to speak was awesome, nice, thank you, I'd love to. Easy, no pressure. There was no pressure, because there was no survival of the identity that had been triggered. And for the other colleague, there might well be other areas of his life where huge triggering could happen, and things take on an immense pressure appearance as a result, but not in speaking. But for me, the self-identity and the pressure were both in that moment created from the same insecurity, and there we go. That was the subjective experience. And what's interesting for all of us is, as that thing which has no apparent reality and yet looks the most real thing of all of it, which is the idea of me as separate, me as this believed thing that I think I am, me as the thing that should be controlling experience, controlling mental thought processes. That me is not true. That me doesn't exist. when it's the sort of central belief hub, it controls all, it dictates all experience. And so stress and pressure are dictated by that. And as that idea of me as separate falls away, then these external forces are related to from a more and more sane and realism-based basis. So, and this is where I think we don't go into denial, because from sanity, from an understanding of the human body and its requirements, it becomes obvious that there are ways that the human system flourishes, and that an expansion of the human capacity will allow for more possibility, for more tolerance, and a sort of gross disruption of the human system by applying pressure that it just cannot withstand will have an effect on the human system. And it's, yes, we could say yes, on the one hand, it's all subjective, it's all thought. And on the other hand, no. the experience might be subjective, but the pressure is so far beyond the realms of what a human physical body can cope with, that it's that is having its effect on the system regardless of what the mind is doing. So it's a sort of, it's nuanced, isn't it? It's blurry. And it does seem to me that the two things that we can do that helps bring everything to sanity, to clarity, is a greater and greater understanding of what we are, and that there is no entity that is separate from intelligence, separate from consciousness, separate from aliveness. That is just a creation of mind. And then as that becomes more obvious, a greater and greater intimacy with the world of physics, of stress and pressure, of how forms interact with each other, and what is the reality of form. That's sane, and that's an intimacy with the world, with feelings, with experience, with past, with current happenings, that has nothing to do with bypass, and everything to do with a greater and greater and greater understanding and expansion of capacity and of knowledge, involvement, which is for the benefit of all of us. And yeah, so thank you for that question. Lots of love. Bye.